Folks, welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, the NBC Network, the Biz World channel. I mean, we're going to be all over the place today because the topic that we have, I think, will affect everyone, does affect everyone. And my expert today is someone who's going to guide us through how we can navigate this stuff. Today's guest is Rob Siciliano, recognized as the media go-to cybersecurity expert and creator of the Strategic Human Firewall, a cybersecurity expert, private investigator, and one of the most trusted voices in protecting people from scams, identity theft, and digital threats. With decades of experience and thousands of media appearances, Robert is on a mission to help individuals and organizations stay one step ahead in a world of evolving cybercrime. Robert, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, I don't know where to start, man. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in your world. I mean, cybercrime, cybersecurity, it is the place to be. I mean, it's funny. I just was looking at something and they say that one of the jobs that are most in demand today is cybersecurity experts. I mean, we can start there, but before we do that, I do want to go back to a little bit of, if you can tell us a little bit about your expertise and how it all, what is your background on things, because I think I don't know. You do look like a law enforcement to me, but you private investigator. Maybe you've had a run, in maybe one of the PDs. So let's talk. Maybe I'm wrong.
So, I speak for a living. So I get on the platform in front of live audiences, at conferences, events, and so forth. So I'm a keynote speaker, right? And so I'll speak as, 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever. I get off the platform. Inevitably, someone comes up to me like, so how did you get into this? What are you like? Former government official, law enforcement, FBI, Secret Service? Like, what's your background? And I tell them, like, literally, I am from the streets of Boston. Like, that's where I got my chops. Okay. Yeah. So for me, there was like two or three significant events over the course of my lifetime that kind of shaped my outlook and where I am today. Lots of people kind of get into their profession based on experience, or many do. And for me, it started off when I was literally 12 years old. Okay. So I was, back then, I don't know how old you are, but like when I was growing up, my parents, they'd let us out at like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning and say, be back for dinner, which might have been like between 5 and 8 o'clock. We'd come back like filthy, bleeding, whatever, gone for the whole day. And my dad would let us, we had a relatively long leash, so to speak. He kind of let us do whatever we wanted to do. And
Hold
so
on.
at the age of 12, I remember like my dad would let us go into downtown Boston, get on the train. And me and my brother had gone in one day. We get off the train, and there's like five kids waiting for us in the street, waiting for anybody. And they mugged us. They took all our money, and I wasn't prepared for that, right? So I go home kind of beaten up and bloodied. And my dad's like, oh, yeah, today uh, you were the prey and those boys were the predators. Like they were the wolves and you were the rabbit. And I was like, oh, like I didn't quite understand what he was saying. And then he made us like, sat down and made us watch Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom on PBS. And he showed us like the lions stalking the gazelles in the plains of the Serengeti. And he said, like, it's always been like that. It'll always be like that. And your job is to, become a tougher target, to like recognize when someone means to do you harm and what your options are. So we started to take in self-defense and learn, kickboxing and karate and different self-defense programs. And about a year later, I was 13. I met a girl at summer camp who I liked, and she liked me, kind of like my first crush. And one day, like, we get off at her bus stop, and we're sitting on her front stairs of her house, and she looks at me and she's like all kind of solemn, and she said, I think you should know something. And she said, my mother's boyfriend assaulted me. And I didn't quite understand what she was talking about, but I knew it was bad based on how she said it to me. And so I go home and I asked my dad, I'm like, what is sex and what is rape? Because I had no idea what she was talking about. I just knew it was bad based on how she said it. So I learned about the birds and the bees and sexual assault in the same conversation at the age of 13. Like back then, we didn't know what sex was. We didn't know what sexual assault was. Like, we didn't have that information like kids do today. Like, to find a 13-year-old today that doesn't know what sex is would be like amazing. But then back then, 44 years ago, it wasn't a common discussion that kids had. And so I started to gravitate towards professions revolving around personal protection and self defense. And I started teaching karate. And so personal security was my thing early on. And in my mid 20s, I was teaching real estate agents self defense and personal protection because real estate agents get murdered in the US. And so I had to get a computer to like set myself up and to organize my business and to have a web presence and all. And I also was selling product to the real estate agents. And so I had to get the ability to accept credit cards, right? So I had to get merchant status through my computer, which meant buying an additional card to install in the computer so I could have dial up to AOL. So my point of sale as my computer would work and accept those credit cards. And after about a month of that, setting up merchant status, I got hacked in 95. My IBM PS1 consultant, which was the make and model of my computer that had a Windows 3.0 OS and a 150 megabyte hard drive, got compromised. And so I lost thousands of dollars in product via credit card fraud, via my dial up AOL connection. And I was devastated. Like, it was a big deal for me back then, it would be a big deal today. And I didn't know how it happened. So I talked to my bank and credit card company, and they explained to me that this was becoming a thing. So my business at this point now was personal security as it relates to violence and theft prevention. And to me, theft prevention at the time was like when you're burglarized or when you're mugged or pickpocketed. It wasn't like something that could happen over AOL, over a dial-up connection to the internet. So my thing was always reverse engineering the bad actors, predators' motivation and how they choose their victims. So now I'm a victim of this like new crime, and I wanted to understand how it happened. And as upset as I was, I was fascinated by how they did what they did, and I'm thinking like if this could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. And like the bank said, the credit card company said, like, this is becoming a problem. So now I start understanding it and reverse engineering that process and talking to real estate agents about like, hey, you're sharing sensitive information and like this is becoming a problem too. So as I'm speaking and training on personal protection, information security started to become a problem and something that I started to talk about. And in the late 90s, as more and more municipalities went online, social security numbers now became compromised. And identity theft as you and I know it today started to become a real problem. Like somebody gets your social, they open up lines of credit under your name, was a problem back in the late 90s as it is today. And so I was one of the only people on the planet truly talking about it at the time. So around like 9/11, that's when my business really started to take hold. Because now, like CNN's calling me, they're like, oh, like, how do we deal with this? Like personal security, like, you know, personal protection in the air, like on a plane. Like, what do you do? So, like, the New York Times wrote an article about me, like, new deputy in the sky, and showed a picture of me sitting on my Harley at, in the Boston area, talking about like what it is that I do. And then, data security started to become a thing along with personal protection that I'd already been talking about. And here we are today, like 30 years later. And truly, what has changed and what has not changed is what has changed is criminals now look at fraud as a business. Whereas back then, it was like, a one off thing. Today, it is organized crime globally that utilizes victims of human trafficking as slave labor to orchestrate their various frauds. And it's a, 300 and something billion-dollar business or more. It's ridiculous. Whereas consumers, people like you and I, we haven't really evolved that much. We haven't changed that much when it comes to protecting our own information. Like most people don't do what's necessary to protect their own data, like, pay for antivirus, engage in identity theft protection services, utilize what's called the credit freeze, which is free. Most of us are using the same passcode across multiple accounts. We're not using two-factor authentication. Like, we haven't changed all that much, but the criminals have. And they look at us as sitting ducks because most of us are. So that's my backstory.
Well, we have a lot, man. I mean, the hour is not going to be enough, dude. We're going to have to break it down and maybe go beyond. Well, first things first, first, thank you for sharing that. And again, I love that when I asked the question about your background and you said that's everybody always asks the same question because you do have that personality. I mean, just looking at you, you have that presence. But certainly your background actually is really tied into who you are and your aura and energy, even though through my screen, as I'm looking at you here and the way you present it. First of all, I love it. I mean, it's one thing to learn, I guess, to counter criminal activities actually through law enforcement. The other is to really learn it from the street level, because at the end of the day, street smartness is a big deal, right? You have to. I love what you talked about, the idea of watching the gazelles and the actual lions, and how they're sitting ducks, and like the example you said right now, we are probably the gazelles, when we're not doing a good job about our cybersecurity level here. And I love also the idea about you got kind of beat up when you were a kid and you took care of business and you kind of learned, because that was my case too, actually. So we have a lot of similar stuff in terms of the defense thing, because I did start martial arts when I was 9, and it was because I was bullied and kind of made it part of my life, and I've always had that and still do. And it makes a difference in how you do your awareness. Situation awareness is different. I mean, I've evolved from karate to taekwondo to shinobi-ryu or ninjutsu, if you want to call it that way. And there's a lot of stuff you learn how to, like, to observe everything around you, whatever you are, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I another thing that I just wanted to really just kind of briefly talk about is what you've heard from the girl at 13 at that time. And you're right that I think we're about the same age, probably, an ex, generation 70s kid. And I can tell you, you're right. We didn't know much about all the stuff that not today our kids will probably be very easily, acquainted with. So our days, you don't know it, and unless someone tells you or you hear, like, a lot of it was not taught in school, whatever, and it was taboo in the family. So we didn't talk about these things. But to be exposed to that thing at early age, that just shows that the reality of things is life is really difficult, and there's crazy stuff going on around us. Crime is a big deal. Robbery is a big deal. I mean, all the stuff. This is before actually even the cyber level, and that's also always the case. I mean, and so being in the mix of all those things, being able to actually navigate those. I love what you said about real estate and how you were teaching them, security and how to be, aware of things. Because here's another thing. I actually did 20 years in real estate, teaching real estate law in New York. And we had a real estate school, and I've even invested in properties and things like that. So I was an agent, so we did go to homes and stuff. But the other equivalent to that is I've been in the insurance space, and insurance agents also are huge with home visits and, just going to neighborhoods. I mean, we had, agents that are female, and we had to give them some training as to what to do. Sometimes we had them even on the phone when they go to some of the buildings, especially in the city,
Yep.
to make sure that if they see something off, they call us. I mean, we can listen to everything. They can sometimes tell, like, I have my supervisor on the line with me, things like that. So you're right. I mean, being aware of these things, and I worked also for a company that had a lot of nurses, and nurses do home visiting. It was a home visiting nurses, company. So these nurses were actually in people's homes, and you never know what neighborhood you'll be in, and it could be a little rowdy, it could be crazy. You never know what to expect. So these things were part of some of the stuff we've done at work,
Yep.
just to evaluate things. And you mentioned about 9/11. I can tell you, in one of the companies, we did a lot of active shooter training, and where you're aware of what to do, how to do it, and drills and things like that. So all this stuff is things that people sometimes don't think it's real, but someone's watching right now, like, oh, really, this is happening, folks, everywhere, and it's as real as you can get it. People get mugged every day, and if you're not prepared, you'll have problems. And you can see even social media, and talk about sex trafficking, you talk about all these things. Another thing, it's funny you said AOL because I still have an AOL email. I tell people now I have my AOL, like my email address, and like, what is that? It's like, that's the first one. America Online, you got mail, so that's everybody knows that, But I really do. Like, I still have it, and it's funny because my wife and I use the same email. We have others, but we still use that as from back in the days. And it still works actually. That's a good thing. But you're right.
Yeah.
Back in the days, you had the floppy disk that you put in and you download it, and it was kind of like dial up, and it takes forever. But I didn't know actually at the time that you could get hacked through that stuff. That's something new to me today, because I mean, how can possibly they do it? But you're right. Cybersecurity hacking is a huge thing. Passwords is big. Social security is a big deal in the U.S. People don't realize how many people can easily, and we've heard about data breaches and leaks and stuff like that, and people kind of wind up with there were movies about it. I think it was a movie with the called identity theft, I think, about the girl that was using credit cards and kind of buying stuff, and, and she messed up with the name because the name was the same guy, whatever. So like, I think what's it, Bates was in a movie.
Yeah.
So I mean, those are real things, and a lot of the stuff that actually you mentioned, there have been movies that actually depict that. I mean, a recent one for hacking, portfolios and finances is Beekeeper, with the Statham. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Pretty
that's
true, actually.
yeah. I mean, those are real operations that are out there. I mean, obviously the movie is fiction. I think there was a second comeback on that, like a sequel to that one coming up. But yeah, those things are real. Like, I had my kids watch that just to tell them, hey, listen, this is what's happening. So you got a call, just go online. And we've heard quite a few stories about texts that are coming in, transportation texts, whatever, tolls. I mean, I think that's a more recent one in the New York City area where people tell you like, you owe toll or whatever, and you
Everywhere.
respond. Oh, everywhere. There you go. So you click on that, and boom, you're at your phone is that back in days, you walk in Walmart, someone can actually scam your wallet just by walking. So I had to buy actually a little one of those protective wallets. We hear about credit cards, theft at gas stations and terminals at stores and bodegas. This stuff is real, and it's amazing that we just need more work. So I appreciate the work you do, Robert. I mean, certainly. It is important. But now you're called the media's go-to cybersecurity expert. Now I know why. CNN and all these guys, come to you, and they came to you to guide them. And I love
Heck,
the
I've
idea
been
that
on Howard Stern twice.
oh, well, listen, I'm gonna be honored just to be with you here now if you told me that,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's probably one of the best shows you've been on.
Oh,
But
yeah.
he's funny, dude. I mean, what? Believe it or not, he's one of the people that got me to do this job. That's him. So because I grew up with his shows as well. But here's the thing. So you mentioned also something about a guy in the sky, which is the air marshals. I mean, it's pretty real. I mean, these people do exist, and they do protect the people in the air. Which do we have to actually live in a life that has to do this stuff? Sadly, yes, because it is a moneymaker, and people actually are not paying attention, or they think it's not going to happen to me, and that's really like it won't happen to me mindset. Why is that so dangerous today, Robert?
So there's a reason for all that, right? So what most people don't realize is that, well, first and foremost, uh, about 97% of all the people that you will ever come in contact in the course of your life essentially are good people. Like 97% are worthy of your trust. That means, like, in their heart of hearts, like, they're okay. They're normal. They don't necessarily have bad intentions. That 97%, they occasionally lie, they occasionally deceive, they occasionally do harm, but that's not their motivation. Like, that's not their, like, MO, right? Whereas 3% of the world's population, and they say, like, and you could look this up yourself. They say, like, it's anywhere from like 3% of women to as much as 6% of men. The medical community would consider them like antisocial personality disorders, ASPD, which essentially they are diagnosed sociopath, psychopath, right? Many of them like are essentially hardcore narcissists, and these are the people amongst us that don't experience empathy, sympathy, guilt, or remorse, right? These are the people that truly have no shame. So hitting, hurting, harming, taking from others, they are the wolves, right? And we are the, rabbits. They're the lions and we're the gazelles, right? And it's always been like that. It will always be like that. And so our job is to recognize them when they mean to do us harm, when they contact us, either via phone, email, or in person, when they are in our physical presence, and what their motivations are, how to recognize that risk, and what to do in response. And ideally, we engage in proactive tactics, strategies to reduce that risk. Do things a little bit differently, change our behavior a little bit differently so that we do things a little bit differently. And that means like, recognizing what those strategies are. For most of us, it's like, locking our doors, engaging in home security systems, changing up your passcodes, using two-factor authentication, using password managers. Like these are the basic things, right? And all those things are what I basically teach. But there's reasons why we don't lock our doors, and there's reasons why we don't have home security systems. There's a reason why we don't use up a different passcode across all of multiple accounts, and that boils down to like human biology, as crazy as that sounds. So for years and years and years, like we've been navigating this planet, you and I, right, and along with everybody else, right. And there's characteristics about you and I like that are essential to what it means to be an interdependent species. And that's what we are. We are an interdependent species. We depend on man needs woman, woman needs man for our survival in order to procreate so that we can generate the next generation. That's really what that boils down to. And as an interdependent species, we depend on trust. Like we need to trust each other. You go to the grocery store, you're going to the grocery store basically trusting that everybody that day is going to behave themselves, and no one's going to walk in with an AR-15, and shoot the place up. Like you want to believe that people are generally good. And 97% of them generally are. And even of that 3% of bad actors, not all of them are actually violent, right? But there is a significant portion of them that make a lot of noise and that are. And so that trust that we all rely on, that we give the benefit of the doubt to others pretty much all the time anyways, right? Over the past 30 plus years, I've determined that trust by default, I call the human blind spot. Okay. And the human blind spot is that psychological and biological instinct to trust others, right? Essentially, it is that cognitive gap where biological trust today overrides, digital suspicion. It just overrides like all forms of suspicion because, again, we want to and need to trust. And that leaves the door wide open for all kinds of fraud and deception. Think of it as like, that biological default to trust and psychological shortcuts, like heuristics that criminals use to bypass human logic. So again, like biological impulse versus intellectual understanding essentially is an internal conflict between our evolved survival instincts and our modern knowledge of all kinds of physical and digital risks, right? So that human blind spot essentially like prevents us from even acknowledging security. And part of that process is like, so for example, like in my live presentations, I'll get in front of an audience and I'll ask like basic questions like, how many of you have a home security system? And usually I get like 15% of the room says, yeah, I got a home security system. And then I ask the 85% of the room, okay, so why don't you have a home security system? And so the answers are generally like, oh, we don't have a home security system because we have insurance, as if insurance is going to protect you at 3 a.m., you know?
You're alive.
Or, right? Or we don't have a home security system because my husband says if they're going to break in, they're going to break in anyways. What are we going to do? Which that right there kind of pisses me off, actually, because I have daughters and I have a wife. And at 3 a.m., like, I'm not going to like, just like, yeah, if they're going to break in, they're going to break in. What am I going to do? Like, hey, you're on your own, girls. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I would never say that. I would never even think that. That fatalistic attitude is big. Like a lot of people have that. And they use that fatalistic attitude to justify why they don't actually have security in place. Okay. But the main reason why people, like when I ask that question, the main reason people say we don't have a home security system, and keeping in mind, and I tell them that like every year in the US, as many as like 1 to 2 million homes are burglarized in the US every single year. So like in the next decade, that's like 10 to 20 million homes burglarized, like every year, right? And the main reason why people say I don't have a home security system, they literally say to me, "We don't have one because I don't want to live like that." And I say, "Well, what does that actually mean?" "Well, I don't want to have to worry. I don't want to be afraid. I just want to be free. I don't want to have to think about those things." So what they're actually saying is, I would prefer not to think about that. I would prefer to function in denial that it can't happen to me. Therefore, I'm not going to do anything about it because I don't want to have to think about it. That is a lot of people. That is, I would say, 85 to 90% of the US population chooses to function in denial. And denial is like the psychological thing that helps us avoid worry and fear and anxiety and threats. Like we would rather put our head in the sand, the covers over our head and not think about these things and do nothing. Function like with fatalistic attitudes, it can't happen to me. Why bother? If they're going to break in, they're going to break in. Like that's a lot of people. Um, I asked them, I said, okay, so I'm a guy that actually has 20 plus security cameras, right? And this is actually true. And so like if you say, okay, this guy's got 20 plus security cameras, what might be your observation of me and how I navigate the world? Like I wake up every day and I got 20 security cameras. Your first response would be what? This guy must be what?
Local.
Loco. Right. In
Yeah,
other
crazy, yeah.
words,
And nuts.
nuts.
He's like, yeah,
Or
it's like, yeah, he's too, he's too, I don't know, he's out of his mind.
paranoid,
Yeah, that's a
right?
that's a perfect way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. So in 30 years of doing what I do, I've asked that question for 30 years and I get the same answer and over and over and over again. Paranoid, right? And paranoia is a diagnosable medical mental health issue. It is a dis-ease of the mind. People that are diagnosed as paranoid truly believe that others are out to get them. I have a first cousin who suffers from this illness, and she, right now, I think, is living in her car because it's the only place that she feels safe. The meds just don't work for her. And in our country, we associate and assimilate security and paranoia. And paranoia is an awful thing when you think about it. People who have it are essentially out of control, whereas security is, processes to reduce risk to get a form of control. And so that dichotomy of, what security is versus what security isn't, why would you ever want to engage in security practices if you think it's about paranoia, you know? But as a culture, as a society, that's how we look at security, which it isn't truly paranoia. I mean, you don't put your seatbelt on because you're paranoid. You put your seatbelt on because it gives
Question.
you control over the vehicle, you know? But we look at security as kind of a bad thing in the US, which is unfortunate, which is why people don't lock their doors. It's why they don't have home security systems. It's why they don't use password managers. It's why they don't protect their identities. It's why they don't talk to their kids about, forcible rape. It's why you don't have a sit down with your daughter before she goes off to college about sexual assault and so forth. Like, this is what I've learned over 30, 40 years. And so as long as we look at security as a bad thing, we're always going to do nothing and justify it with fatalism. That's how we are. That's why.
Well, Robert, I'm listening to you. There's so much stuff that you actually put in right now that is surreal. And again, as you said, is the blind spot, a human blind spot, or it's not me, or I'm never going to happen to me. And I can tell you this through close enough personal experience. Um, my best friend, he got, he was at a Boston market, and a guy came with an actual shotgun in there, demanding, money. And so my first wife, who passed, was actually, assaulted with a gun to the head at an ATM machine. So this is not fake news or anything. It's real from people that I know and that I'm that are close to me. I've seen people actually chasing people with a knife. That was like my first, experience in the subway in Brooklyn. So stuff like this is real, folks. I actually, in a couple of years back, in my town, there were a few people that came in from Texas, and they were actually going, to some homes. The American, communities from India, South Asia, they have this Diwali holiday, which they have all their, I guess, gold and stuff and ornaments that they actually use, and these people were targeting them, and literally they would ring the bell, you open the door, then knock the whoever opens the door, they put them in the lock, in a room, and they burglarize them and they leave. I've actually personally had, attempts on my driveway to steal vehicles, and actually they did shut the alarm. I don't know how they do it. They scramble it. Even the camera had a gap in that time, and we called the cops, and there's nothing. They discovered them, they caught them, but it was later. But now I'm gonna tell you this, and say people say you don't have the cameras. I have the cameras, and after this happened, actually, I have to say it this way, but I do believe in the Second Amendment, and I actually did exercise that right at that point, and that's really what it was. I mean, there was a point where you know what, enough is enough, and you know what, you have to be prepared for the worst, and it's gonna happen, and it can happen. So you can't say it's not gonna happen to me, folks. It can be the ostrich effect. Just put your head down in the sand, as you said, and kind of like, is it gonna win, go by it? No, it's gonna happen, and it can happen. We have people that are being abducted. We have people that are being, abused all the time. We have murders, and so it is happening for real. And to your point, it's not paranoia. It's being cautious, is being preventative. Actually, that's really what martial arts is. For example, the first things is like you're aware of things. You're not going to allow things to happen because you can see them in the distance before they happen. It's too late. You can deal with the situation when it happens, but it's best to be prepared, in advance. I mean, we hear about bug out bags, in case of emergency and stuff. And we did have storms. We did have, bad weather where you have to be prepared to move, for example, from your house and things like that. So a lot of things can be as real. But now when it's driven by that percent, and it's a small percentage, just to your point, everybody is usually merry, they're nice, they're cool, but you never know. I mean, someone can actually snap out, like, Kirk, Michael Douglas in that movie when he went to the McDonald's. I won the breakfast meal. And he says, we stopped at 11. It's like I was here. And then he went on a spree. Things can happen, folks. And it's not far-fetched. I mean, Robert's work is really to train us and train the public to the best of what is available to us to be prepared and not
Yeah.
fall for being a victim and then claim insanity or claim like ignorance. That's not going to work, folks.
And what's funny, like all your experience, right, has trained you to be what I call the strategic human firewall. So
I
my
love it.
my training over the past 30 plus years has evolved in such a way where, I'm able to look at security awareness training and what's being offered today, which in most corporations, it's like phishing simulation training. Like that, and that's the extent of it. Like most security training is recognizing a phishing email. And that's it. Like, unless you are sending your loved ones to physical self defense training, most people don't do that. And when it comes to information security training, like cybersecurity stuff, most people don't even know where to even get that other than like YouTube or something. Most companies or government agencies, actually, only about 60% of them, provide the phishing simulation training thing that I'm talking about. What I've developed is something I call the strategic human firewall, which you already are based on your learning experiences. You recognize risk, like you see it coming, like you know what to look for in people's behavior. You're probably a bit more cognizant every time the phone rings, an email comes in, or a text message comes in. Like you're looking for what is the motivation of this person standing in front of me? What is the motivation of this email, phone call, text message I received, right? Because of experience. So experience has told you don't automatically trust, right? And we learn that often in like an urban setting. And it's funny, like when you said like Brooklyn, like you see a lot of stuff, people who like don't know you would say like, oh yeah, well, he's from Brooklyn, of course, like whatever. I'm from Dubuque, Iowa. That stuff doesn't happen around here. Therefore, I don't have to worry about those things. I don't even have to think about those things. I'm not even going to change up my passcodes because those things don't happen around here. And it's like, yeah, they do. you people have methamphetamine problems, and those people, like, they literally degrade really quick and they can get violent. And the reality of it is, like, it happens everywhere. And I tell my audience is like, don't worry about any of this stuff, but you really do need to do something about it. The worst thing you could do is nothing. And so the idea behind, like, the strategic human firewall is, like, we take people and, like, provide them with an understanding of what risk actually is. First and foremost, like, break down their misconceptions of what security is. It's not about paranoia, it's about managing risk, you know. And once you realize that, yeah, these things can happen to me, the likelihood of them happening is actually relatively slim. But because there's a chance, kind of like, there's a chance of you getting into a motor vehicle accident, like putting the seatbelt on, putting these systems in place is, like, the smart thing to do. So the strategic human firewall is a mindset to manage that risk so that you can block deception, whether it's, a predator, in your presence, or it's, a text message you receive. It's a proactive governance. It's a mindset that turns, like, employees and everyday people from passive targets, it can't happen to me, into active detection layers. It's the shift from, I automatically trust what I see because I don't want to believe it's going to happen to me, to I verify everything. Every phone call, every email, every text message, every person I come in contact with. What's your motivation? Well, how are you going to affect my life before I actually just trust you by default? You know? And I call this essentially a shift from security awareness to security appreciation. Okay. You already appreciate security, 2A, the whole thing. The shift from security awareness essentially is, I look at it as, like, security awareness is from your neck up, it's in your head. It's basically like knowing in your head, I know all these risks, to appreciation, which is in your heart, which is caring. Like, not only do I know these risks, I care about all the solutions that are there to protect me and my family and my business. So when employees or consumers appreciate how security protects their own lives, right, behavior changes permanently. And that's what I do when I get in front of a live audience, is, like, it's taking them from, okay, like, I'm taking the security awareness training because my boss told me to making the security training all about the employee, making it personal to them. You know, all security from my perspective is personal. I believe that the core belief is that people protect what they love, by teaching someone to say, protect their child's digital footprint, their own identity, their bank accounts, their data, their dollars. You create more secure employees and, consumers. Ultimately, like, I call this the security appreciation gap. It's that chasm between that employee's intellectual understanding of risk, intellectual, like, awareness, and the emotional commitment to act on that knowledge, which again is in your heart, appreciation. And ultimately, we achieve what I call the kitchen table effect, essentially that multiplier effect, where successful training ends with the employee, or the consumer, teaching those concepts to their family at home around the kitchen table. Most security training doesn't do that at all. Whereas, when you come from my background, down in dirty streets of Boston, 12 years old, getting mugged, 13 years old, meeting my first victim of sexual assault, all security, like, when you think about personal security, is violence and theft prevention. But truly, what's more personal than, like, your identity being compromised? So when you start with that, for all the listeners, for every employee, like, oh yeah, like, I do want more security in my life. Like, it isn't about worry and fear and paranoia. It's about, like, making sure that before my daughter goes off to college, like, she knows how to mess somebody up. It's so that, like, I know how to protect my family, from harm, but not just from physical harm. Like, make sure that we all have what's called a credit freeze and a password manager, like, do basic things. Like, once people adopt this strategic human firewall mindset, it's like, oh, like, this is easy. Like, I can do this. Like, I want more of that in my life. And that's how it should be.
Well, thank you, Robert. It's funny. I'm listening to you, and this whole thing that you're talking about, I it took me to a little funny story where my best friend, my partner in business, he has a huge family and they're huge people. I mean, I'm 5'8", and they're like 6 and up, everybody, and they're all double size of me. And one time, like, I was sitting down there, like 40 of them, and I'm sitting here like, so now where do I start if someone really, if it gets rowdy and we get into a fight? I got to start sizing up these people. Where do I begin? And so I told him that he was having a crush about that. I mean, he was laughing because I really was like, too many folks with testosterone, a lot of buddies here, and I got to be like, what's my exit strategy here and stuff. By the way, that's something also. You go to movies, you go stuff. They'll tell like look up, where the nearest exit stuff, basic stuff. But you know what? You're talking about some people are thinking like, "Well, okay, I'm cool. It's not going to happen in my town." Let me tell you something. Those stories I told you about the people in the home invasions, that's not in Brooklyn. That's actually in the suburbs of Jersey. So it's not like, that's where it happens. I mean, a lot of crime happens, as a matter of fact, if I'm thinking as a criminal, I would actually go to those neighborhoods where they think that, nothing is happening. That's what people actually do. And actually those people that they caught, for the cars, they were actually from Newark. So, and they come down and they just kind of, venture out into these little towns and see like because to your point, it's cozy, it's nice, it's developments, you can leave your door open, whatever. And before you know it, you got someone up your door, and that's a problem. So it is a serious fact. Now, and I love what you said about even, the trainers and the fishing and stuff. The way I look at it personally, and Robert, you're the expert. I actually look at everything suspicious. If I see an email, I mean, I use AI to even detect that. I'm like, hey, is this potentially a risk
Good.
factor? Is this a legit
Mhm.
email? And he tells you
Good.
like, no, this doesn't look. And you can tell, the English sometimes is wrong, or the syntax in the discussion is not correct. The logo is kind of twisted. And some of these things, I've seen stuff from FBI, I've seen stuff from Meta, I've seen stuff from PayPal. That's all fake, and you send it to the phishing department there, and they can you report it them. But like you have to be aware of these things, to your point, and not everybody is. So I love the way you do this. You train people to really. I love that, the human firewall. Now you did mention something about credit freeze, and I'd like for you, if you don't mind, expand a little bit on that. So people know, because everybody's got a credit card and everybody's got like. And by the way, I have one time I was in Florida and my card declined, and then I called the bank and they say, "Oh, we just got a transaction in Sweden." I'm like, I'm in Florida. I'm not in Sweden. And so this stuff happens, folks, to everyone, and everybody is at risk unless you know what you're doing. And actually, I remember this was at a gas station. They used the old template, back in the days.
Yeah, yeah. The
I mean,
swiper.
yeah, this was not too far back. I mean, they had the machines, but this particular, place, they had the actual, the swiper, and they kind of take the actual imprint of your card. Literally the next day, I'm getting the card decline. I'm like, what's up? And oh, you just we see that there's 3 transactions about the same amount in Sweden. I'm like, listen, lady, I'm actually calling from Florida. I'm in Florida right now. I'm having a good time with my kids. That's not a transaction. Awesome. Ultimately, with credit cards, there's protection and stuff, but you can still lose your shirt sometimes if you don't know what to do, and if it's a big amount, and just getting through the process, and identity theft can be also costly. So if you don't mind, guide us through
Yeah.
credit freeze and social security. Also, that's a big one. That happens in the
Yeah.
U.S. with the system, because if you get into that, good luck.
So social security numbers and credit freezes go together. Credit cards and preventing credit card fraud is a different thing. So there's two topics right there. Okay. As far as credit cards are concerned, there's no real way to prevent credit card fraud. So every time you use it, there's a risk that that card can be used without your authorization. So credit card fraud can't be prevented. However, to mitigate credit card fraud, there are a couple of things that you can and should do. Number one, if you have cards that you like hardly ever use, you could turn those cards off. Like today, via your credit card company's apps or websites, you can go into the settings, and there's often ways to like toggle off that card. So when you're not using it, it can't be used without your authorization. So toggling off a card until you toggle it back on is one way to prevent its unauthorized use. Otherwise, every time you use a card, there's a chance that it can get hacked. There's a chance that server, waiter, waitress, that clerk at the point of sale, the checkout line, can take that card number and use it without your authorization. The only thing you could do in response to that is obviously check your statements and refute unauthorized charges as often as possible. What I do is with my phone, I've set up via the card company's mobile apps and websites notifications and alerts. So every single time my cards are used, any one of them, and I've got like a dozen credit cards, every single time a card is being used, I either get a text message, an email, or a pop up on my mobile phone, which tells me your American Express was just used at a particular gas station, like every single time, or, your card was just used at this particular restaurant. So I get notifications as those cards are being used to let me know in real time. I'm notified, push notifications, pop ups, text messages, emails. And if I didn't, place that order, swipe that card or whatever, then I contact the credit card company and say, hey, that wasn't me. And in real time, I can refute those charges. So push notifications. So if you go to your credit card company's websites or apps, go into the menu, go into the settings, and you'll see notifications or alerts, either under security or just under notifications. And you can turn on all those notifications. So I'm alerted for every single charge, like less than and above $1, whether it's in like I swipe it in person or card not present, which is like over the phone or via the web, or if it's international. So mitigating credit card fraud is turning off the card via the app or online, or getting notifications that are email, text, or pop-ups. So push notifications. Now, credit freezes are different altogether and do not in any way affect your existing cards. So a credit freeze is a tool that is offered through the credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. They're the three major credit bureaus. They've been around forever, okay? And so if you were to go online to TransUnion, Experian, or Equifax, their websites offer the ability to freeze your credit report, okay? So freezing a credit report means that when a lender goes to check your credit, so for example, somebody gets your social security number. I've had criminal hackers email me my own social security number. Hey, security guy, here's your social, haha. Basically flexing their muscle, showing me how cool they are. I could care less because my credit's frozen. And what that truly means is when a criminal hacker or whatever gets my social security number and they fill out an application to get a credit card, an application to get a loan, an application to refinance my own house, an application to buy a car, on loan, right? When the lender goes to check my credit using the application that the identity thief submitted to them, when they go to check my credit report has been frozen, which means they can't see my credit scores. If the lender can't see my credit scores, then they're not going to grant that loan or that credit card or that refinance or that car to that identity thief because my credit report is frozen. Therefore, like they don't know my scores. They don't know what their risk level is, So credit freeze freezes your credit report so they can't see your credit scores. That's been around actually since 2008. And I froze my credit in 2008, which means when I want to get a loan, refinance, get a new credit card from a new credit card company, and so forth, I temporarily thaw my credit. And that process basically is I got the TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax apps on my phone, right? Or you could have it on your web browser. I just go to TransUnion and I temporarily thaw my credit so that, like, if I want to thaw it today because I want to, get a new car, whatever, right? I temporarily thaw it while I'm at the dealership, and then I'll fill out the application to get a loan at the dealership over with my phone because it's that easy now. And then I'll have my credit refrozen like a day later. It's as simple as that. So Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, go to their websites, search credit freeze on their websites, and you'll see the ability to set up an account with them. And once you do, they're going to ask you for your name, your address, your phone number, email address. They're going to ask for your social security number, which give it to them. It's the only way to freeze your credit. Plus, they know who you are anyways, right? They're going to ask you a bunch of like what they call knowledge-based authentication questions, KBA. Like, did you have a loan at bank A, B, C, or D? Did you live at address A, B, C, or D? Is your mother's maiden name A, B, C, or D, and so forth? And once you qualify because you answered the knowledge-based authentication questions, now they'll acknowledge you and set up an account for you so you can freeze and unfreeze your credit anytime you want. My credit's been frozen since 2008, and I've probably thawed it maybe 10 times in the past, what, 17 years, to refinance, to get loans and such. So it's an easy thing to do, and it actually, like going forward, makes you a tougher target.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for actually breaking it down for us. And I think audiences, if you're watching and listening, take that to the bank. You know what to do now. And it's not a difficult task if you're really looking for a refi or whatever the case. It's again,
Yeah.
tow it one day and then just reactivate the next day or close it the next day.
Yeah.
So now let me ask you a question. Today we have AI scams, deepfakes, voice cloning. There's a lot of warnings about these things, and what would you say to our audiences about these are the new ways of really getting to somebody? I mean, voice cloning, you can call, hey, and now they can just copy your voice from any, especially if you're on social media or like us right now on the radio here. This will be like a quick thing, and they can clone. I mean, you have also apps like that are, very easily, creating avatars or voice clones of who we are and things like that. So what do you say to that?
So when you get a phone call and your loved one or your coworker or your partner and their voice has been cloned, you're not going to know that it's not them. Like you're not going to know. You're not going to be able to literally tell the difference between the cloned voice and the human that you know's voice. Like we are incapable of telling the difference between real or fake when it comes to cloned voices. There's technology that can determine the difference, but we don't have the capacity. Our limited brain cannot determine based on the audio real or fake. So that said, it's the scenario that you need to acknowledge in regards to is this real or fake? So, for example, you get a call from a sibling, you get a call from a parent, and they're desperate. They're in dire straits. They've been arrested. They've been kidnapped. As crazy as that sounds. Okay. They're screaming in the background, and a voice comes on and says, we've got your dad, we've got your mom. And you literally hear your daughter, your family member in the back screaming, and you recognize their voice as the voice screaming. Okay. You're not going to know if it's really them or not based on the sound. It's the scenario that you need to acknowledge. Is my daughter really being kidnapped? Is my father really being kidnapped? Is my grandchild really talking to me on the phone right now who's been arrested in New Orleans during Mardi Gras and needs $5,000 for me to bail him out? Is that really my grandson? So, what we really need to do at this point is stop and determine, is this scenario probable? Like literally, as your blood pressure is rising, as your gut is freaking out, as the hair in the back of your neck is standing on end because your loved one is in distress, your biological reaction is going to be, I need to alleviate my loved one's pain. That's the first thing you're going to feel and think and do. But the reality of it is that really happening? Okay, so knowing that voice cloning is a thing and knowing that voice cloning is now a part of the criminal hacker's arsenal, that it is likely in this lifetime, you and I, the same way we get phishing emails, the same way we get scammy text messages, the same way we get these fraudulent phone calls, it is likely going forward that we're going to get a voice clone that is going to be a loved one in distress or a loved one that is trying to get us to transfer funds from one account to the other. And instead of actually emotionally and biologically reacting, you got to get in the phone. You got to call a number that you know is legit, you got to get like your loved one like in your presence or on the phone. Like even if your caller ID says it's them, you need to call that loved one back on a number that you know is legit because they can spoof caller ID too. So I just did something on Fox 5 in New York on that exact same thing. A woman gets a phone call from her sister who, like, it was her voice in the background screaming, help. And a man gets on the phone saying, I need $1 million or your sister's
Oh,
dead. You know, that's a legit scam and it works. That's voice cloning. So out of band authentication is you call a number that you know is legit. You text them, you email them, you call them, you knock on their door, you go next door neighbor, whatever it is, whoever it is, to find out if it's legit. That's what you do first. Don't just automatically trust it. Okay, this is my loved one in distress, regardless of like, do it now or else. No, no, no. The likelihood of your daughter getting kidnapped, I mean, think about that for a second. This isn't like, we're not in Mexico City. You know, it's just like, it's just, what is the likelihood of that really happening? The likelihood of you getting scammed in that regard is a heck of a lot higher than your loved one actually being kidnapped, okay? With the deep fakes. So right now, the deep fakes are the video that
mhm.
is a fake of, at this point, what we mostly see is a politician. You know, we see them of the president all the time, right? Or former presidents, or of celebrities. We see deep fakes of them all the time. And often, the technology often is perfect. Like you can't tell real or fake. Like it's that good. I mean, obviously, like, you know, the president, you know, half naked and eating a box of Kentucky Fried Chicken, that's certainly possible. But, you know, we haven't actually seen a real one of them yet. We probably will eventually. That said, um, we know that stuff is fake. But what we may not know is when we see it of that president in a suit and it looks really good and perfect of him saying, we just bombed Russia and so on and so forth. Like we may not know the difference there. So that's where we start to really need to be careful. Like don't start sharing stuff unless you've gotten proof that whatever that celebrity said or that politician said is actually true. Like do your own research. Like truly, like before you actually get alarmed by something that you see on TikTok, Facebook, Reels, whatever. Like acknowledge like is this real? Is this face? We know the cat doesn't really play the piano, but it looks perfect because it is perfect, but it's fake. You know, cats can't play the piano. We know that, but everything about it looks real. So what's happened is CGI, computer generated imagery, right? Which 5 years ago cost, you know, several $100,000 and only people in Hollywood that had access to the absolute best technology in the planet could do that. Now anybody with an iPhone can do that, which is now AI and deep fakes, artificial intelligence via apps that you can play with on your laptop, desktop, mobile phone. So when it's a loved one, right, on a deep fake, same thing, you know, like you can't necessarily trust that that is actually real. So what's the scenario? Is it something probable or is it something improbable and it's probably a scam? So emotionally, you've got to be able to disconnect from what that is to what it might be.
Well, Robert, thank you for breaking that down. I just as you were talking about this, and I do want to just share a couple of scenarios that are very common now, and some of it is really antiquated, and like so my again business partner, he literally he put a check in a mailbox, like how you put the sign and the postman, will take them, as opposed to dropping it in the post office. Actually, there's a group of people that actually go around and they pick up mail and they found the check. They actually wiped out somehow his stuff, changed the number, and went to deposit the check in a bank. And it took a couple of months for him to actually resolve this whole thing and prove that it was just not him and so on and so forth. He had cameras and all the stuff, but it took a little time. There's another one that's coming that you might get especially on Facebook, marketplace. They say, okay, it's a cash transaction, what, or they like, oh, give me your Venmo, whatever, I'll send you, and then they send you an amount of money, and they say, "Oh, we made a mistake and stuff." Like just like they did in that movie in the Beekeeper. They, "Oh, I just deposited some money, and you just give me the account so I can, otherwise I'll lose my job." And boom. I mean, this stuff is happening actually, as simple as that. And of course, with the technology, the deepfake and stuff now, that's to your point, we have to be careful. There's stuff like you said, if you, first of all, you need to know where your family members are in most of the time. I mean, obviously, especially if you have something to where people can actually see you as a like maybe celebrities and things like that. They have to be extra careful, but they know how to handle this. They have their own protection systems and all that. I hope they do. But really, to your point, we just have to be aware of the actual scenario, as you said, and figure out like this even a plausible scenario or not. Which for the most part is not. There's going to be like ridiculously, dumb. Like no way. And yes, that's the whole thing. I mean, and we've had actually on social media. You see these cases where people are calling and pretend to be law enforcement, calling law enforcement, themselves. It's kind of weird stuff that's happening. And you know what I don't get? How dumb can you be to actually do this stuff? Because you're gonna get arrested and you're gonna spend your time in a very nice little cell with not so happy. But again, that's to each his own, as they say, right?
The criminals are getting really good at what they do. I mean, they're organized, like we said. They're functioning out of Asia and India, and these are organized criminals that are using victims of human trafficking to perpetrate all these various crimes, and they've got access to some of the best technology in the world. And you and I, many of us using the same passcode across multiple accounts for the past 30 years, aren't much more advanced due to the fact that we don't look at security as a priority, and that's what prevents us from recognizing all these various frauds and scams and putting those basic systems in place to make sure that like we become that tougher target. A lot of people throw their hands up in the air and say, "Hey, my 14-year-old knows more about technology than I do. Why bother?" It's like, well, that fatalistic attitude is like what gets you into trouble, And so us having this conversation right now and getting, everybody up to speed is what is necessary to like get people to thinking securely, you know? And I tell everybody, like, don't worry about these things as long as you do something about it. So ultimately, like, to avoid those AI driven deep fakes and voice cloning scams, there's a system, a way of thinking to override that biological response, to intellectually react, and it's called the AAA protocol. So the AAA protocol is basically like this manual override of your biology. So you get that phone call, you get that email, that text message, whatever. So the AAA protocol is essentially like, okay, authenticate. Number one, authenticate. Never trust what's being presented to you. Never trust the identity of the person that's being presented to you. Verify the source. So don't trust that it's your loved one. Don't that's at risk or whatever. Don't trust that it's your grandson who's needs money to be bailed out. Verify the source, right? You do that with out of band verification. It's basically like a kill switch. If a request comes in via email, text, or even a live video call, you got to verify through a secondary independent channel. Pick up the phone, call a number, meet in person, break the scammer's monopoly by interacting with that loved one via that out of band, verification. Authorize, you want to authorize like AAA, authenticate, authorize. This again is that request outside of the normal scope of operations. And audit, document that interaction. Like if it isn't recorded, it didn't happen. Like you are in control. And the main thing, like with most people today, like to engage in risk management, the first thing that everybody should do right now is change up your passcodes. As simple and as stupid as that sounds, most people are using the same passcode for multiple accounts. Studies show right now that there's like 15 to 20 billion passwords out there in the dark web. Yeah. And many people are using the same passcode across multiple accounts. And what does that mean? It means that you're using 1 2 3 4 5 6 as a password. You're using password as a password. You're using your kids' names 321 as a password. And if you're using that across multiple accounts and 15 to 20 billion passwords in the dark web, that means the bad guys just grab that data off the dark web and they just log into your accounts. So the key is to use a password manager. And a password manager is a tool that essentially allows you to change up all your passcodes so you never use the same passcode twice. And a password manager uses uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and characters. And so it scrambles up all these passcodes that you're never going to remember, but you don't need to because the password manager remembers them for you. I've had a password manager now for over 20 years. Never been hacked. And it's the best use of my time and my money when it comes to my security and my privacy for like less than $20 a year.
There you go. You just hit the cost there. It's not a lot apparently. So I think we can put that and take it to the bank. Well, so I know we're exceeding an hour here, but Robert, I do have one question for you. It's the silent wealth killer. Something I read. What the hell is that?
Yeah. So that's pig butchering. So
Okay.
pig butchering is a relatively new scam that's been going on now for about 5-ish years. And that's when, like, you know how we get those wrong number text messages? Okay, well, many of us, if not all of us, are getting those wrong number text messages. We don't quite understand what that is. Well, what that is it's like if you don't know that that text message coming in is not like your friend or your family member or somebody in your contact list already, and you respond with, "I'm sorry, we're supposed to have lunch tomorrow. Are you sure? Like you reaching out to the right person?" Once you respond to them, you're already going down the rabbit hole. Okay, because that rabbit hole is once you respond to them, they respond back to you with this picture of a beautiful male or beautiful female, and they're like, "Oh, this is Gloria. Hi, do I have the wrong number?" And you're like, "Whoa, hey, Gloria." Now you're already engaging. I mean, Gloria's gorgeous. She's like a Russian model, right? But what you don't know is this is a scam set up by organized crime in Southeast Asia that's designed to get you to react and respond. And eventually, and what most people don't know is that 25% of all of humanity right now, every human being on the planet, 25% of them are lonely. And loneliness is a very normal thing. Like hunger and thirst are very normal things, right? Loneliness, like hunger, is designed to get you to eat, right? The pain and the ache of being hungry is to motivate you to eat. Well, the pain and the ache of loneliness is to motivate you to find another human and procreate. That's the point of that. Okay. And so when we get those wrong number text messages, that person who they reach out to, if that person is lonely and now they respond, "Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have lunch tomorrow? Who is this?" And they respond, hey, it's Gloria. And you're like, "Gloria, whoa." And Gloria's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Who's this?" And you're like, "Oh, this is John." "Oh, hey, John. It's nice to meet you. You know, where are you from, John?" And John's like, "I'm in Brooklyn." And Gloria's like, "Oh, I'm in Coral Gables, Florida." And she sends a picture of you, just getting out of yoga in her Lululemons, right? And now, like, John's like, "Whoa, hey, nice to meet you, Gloria." And now Gloria is responding to John 6 to 8 times a day for the next like month, every day. And all Gloria is doing is just building rapport. All Gloria is doing is building trust. And John, who a month ago was feeling lonely, after a whole month of like 10 times a day corresponding with Gloria, he wakes up and Gloria is right there. "Good morning, John. How are you today? How'd you sleep last night?" All the way to bed. "Good night, John. I hope you sleep well tonight. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow." After a month of like 70 to 80 to 90 communications a week of John talking to Gloria, how do you think John's going to feel at the end of the month? Where's his loneliness scale? It's gone because it's been replaced by Gloria. Now, Gloria is the puppeteer. And what is John? He's the puppet. And that is a scary proposition because anything that Gloria says going forward, John's going to do. Because scientifically, it works. They have figured out that once you get John to a point where he is no longer lonely, 100%, he is our puppet. And we are going to manipulate him. And we're going to drain him of every single dime he's ever made. And not only that, we're going to get him to borrow money from friends and family. We're going to get him to refinance his home. We're going to get him to sell his truck. We own John because John no longer experiences the pain and ache of loneliness. He experiences the bliss of Gloria, and it's over for John. And John will refinance his house. He will sell his truck. He will borrow money from friends and family. He will liquidate all his investments because the pain and the ache of loneliness is like the worst pain a human can feel. It's like being unbelievably thirsty or unbelievably hungry. You will do anything to quench that thirst. You will do anything to fill that void of hunger. You will do anything to get rid of that loneliness. And we see it over and over and over and over again. And people don't want to even believe after they've lost all their money. They don't even want to believe that they were scammed. They don't even want to believe it. Like, it takes them weeks to overcome the belief that they were actually scammed. Like, they can't even believe it. Like, and you know what they say? How could I be so stupid? And it's like, no, you weren't stupid. I don't think that any single person who's ever been scammed like that, I don't think I would consider a single one of them stupid. I would consider them 100% human. Because biologically, we are designed to trust. Biologically, we are designed and engineered to procreate. By design, we are biologically, we're going to experience hunger pains and thirst and loneliness. And criminals understand the science behind that. Doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human.
Wow. That is scary just to even comprehend right now. And folks, I mean, listen, this is the real stuff, folks. And like you might not think about it, but just be careful. You know, you get a text. So that brings me to a final question before we'll wrap it up. VPN, does that work?
I use a VPN. Yeah, I just came back from a week in Mexico, and at the Mexican airport, at the resort, I wasn't not using a VPN. You know, I'm not going to be in a resort in Mexico with people all around the pool and whatever, like kids with or hackers or whoever. Like, you just don't know. Like, I use a VPN at the wherever I'm out and about. Using my laptop or my mobile phone. If I'm connected to free Wi-Fi, I'm using a virtual private network software. I pay like maybe $30 a year for one, and it masks my data on open free Wi-Fi. I would recommend that you use that. Your LTE 5G connection is fine, but if you're going to use the local, free Wi-Fi, you want to launch a VPN.
There you go, folks. I mean, this is stuff that it's almost like a necessary tool that we have to have in our kit. So, take it from the best. So I know we've exceeded the hour, so much stuff here. I mean, we can go on and on, but I do want to talk about your work and, how can people work with you and, are you available to them, on
Of
in
course.
person and,
Yeah. So my
virtually?
business,
How does that work? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. My business is basically B2B. So I work with companies. So if you're an employee of a company that engages in some type of security awareness training, or either you're like responsible for putting it on or recommending it, I can be found at protectnowllc.com. Again, protectnowllc.com. I'm a hired security awareness trainer or security appreciation trainer. If you just want to learn about this stuff and connect with me, my blog or my newsletter at LinkedIn, or if even at my website, is pretty current. So again, protectnowllc.com is my website, or just find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Robert Siciliano, Siciliano. I'm not too difficult to find.
There you go, folks. Yeah, first of all, I will be pushing your name everywhere because I think anyone I know that has a company that I think they should at least, because a lot of companies have their own, I guess, security officer, and they have their own, I guess, tech folks that can do all the firewall business. But I think this is beyond just that. This is more teaching also the personnel and the staff
Yeah,
members and how to
exactly.
handle themselves in and out of the facilities and in life.
Yep.
So it could be a real, add on as a benefit to employers to give
Oh, they
this
need it.
type of, yeah, to employees. And I think the companies that do that will, they invest more in their staff and
They do.
employees, and so they look better and they get better credit. So it's a beautiful thing. So Robert, I want to thank you for taking the time being with us and sharing a lot of cool stuff, man. And it's scary stuff, but it's real. And I think, it's the stuff that needs to be heard. And sometimes truth hurts, but ignorance is not a bliss. Ignorance is damaging. We need to know. So thank you so much for the work you do, man, and really for coming on and sharing the nuggets here.
You've been very generous with me today. Thank you so much for your time.
My honor, my privilege, and it was fun, man. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, so you're welcome. So that's it, folks. This is the end of our show. Hope you enjoyed this discussion. Take it, share it. There's a lot of stuff here that potentially can save a life and save wealth, whatever you want to call it, whatever is dear to you. But definitely share this value here. And if you're an employer, check it out. We'll have the actual link of Robert in our description of the show. So do connect with him. And that's about it. American H. Hope you're having a good one now. We'll be talking soon.